A warm welcome to this Q&A on digital marketing in 2023. My name is Amy Lishman. I'm the Head of Member Engagement and Deputy Chief Exec at Brighton Chamber. I'm going to be your host for today. So I'm really delighted to welcome our expert today, Barney Durrant. Barney is the founder of Bluebell Digital, a digital marketing consultancy for small and medium-sized businesses and startups. Barney has more than 20 years experience in the digital sector and has worked with a wide range of B2B and B2C clients on their marketing plans. After spending 7 years working with large brands at Google in London, he set up Bluebell Digital to help businesses accelerate their growth with online marketing. So he's pretty qualified to do this session. So I'm going to be asking Barney some prepared questions, all designed to give you the answers you've probably been desperate to ask somebody about trends in the next year. If there are any questions that we can't answer today, we'll work on getting you some answers after the session from Barney, or if applicable, others in our network as well. There's a chance for you to keep asking questions, so do pop them in the chat and I'll be looking at these as they come in. So let's get started. So Barney, the first question for you is, so what do you see as the biggest trends in digital marketing for 2023?
Hi everyone, thanks very much for coming. Yes, as Amy said, I'm Barney. So yes, trends for 2023. Obviously there's a wide range of things happening online, so we couldn't possibly capture all of the things that might be happening, but here's a few that I kind of picked out, which I think will be important sort of this year and on an ongoing basis. I think the first one I looked at was short form video. So we've all heard about TikTok, I'm sure. If you're young enough, you might use it yourself, or if you've got kids, they use TikTok a lot. It's really kind of exploded in the last couple of years and is starting to maybe take some of the attention away from the incumbents like Facebook. So yes, so short form videos, as you know, on TikTok, could be a sort of 30-second, minute-long video, mobile optimized, so it's mobile first. That format, you know, really is taking over, not only because of the influence of TikTok, but also because other platforms like Facebook or Instagram will tend to kind of copy anything that's really popular and put it onto their platforms. So you'd have seen, you know, Instagram Reels have been launched in the last sort of year or so. You would have seen YouTube Shorts, for example. Google also kind of trying to get into that game, and worried that people are not so interested in sort of the long videos you find normally or associate with YouTube, and you know, getting onto that format. So that format's really important. And to you as a business, maybe if you are creating maybe longer videos, you might consider sort of shortening your content a bit, or thinking about tailoring it a bit more for sort of shorter attention spans, mobile first, and on those kind of platforms that I mentioned. Keeping on the social media sort of tip, TikTok, yes, so TikTok absolutely is a growing force and will continue to be so this year and ongoing. Really for younger people, I guess, mainly, although it's, you know, starting to broaden out its appeal, as most of these things kind of do in the way that Instagram initially was probably much younger people, but now is used more broadly. I can see that happening with, you know, with TikTok. The other thing that's happening as well is that some of the bigger companies like Facebook, who also owns Instagram as well, they're starting to lose a little bit of their grip, maybe starting to decline. You know, Facebook has kind of gone up to a sort of tipping point in terms of the numbers of people. It's still obviously a huge platform, but you know, it's starting to maybe sort of decline very slowly. I mean, you might start to see that kind of happening in the next few years. New platforms are emerging, so kind of more niche platforms. One you might have heard of, again, if you've got kids, might be Be Real. The idea of that one being, I think it's a French platform that you take just one picture a day, which you upload, and it's supposed to be a lot more kind of authentic and real than a kind of a sort of really curated Instagram picture that people that sort of change and edit and that kind of thing. Hence the name sort of Be Real. And there's another one that's emerging at the moment in America called Gas, amongst sort of high schoolers, which is kind of top of the charts. And that's again a bit of a sort of change away from maybe some of the negativity associated with Instagram and Facebook, because it's all about sort of praising your classmates rather than obviously some of the negative stuff sometimes that you see on social media. Another thing that's definitely one for this year, which I actually heard a sort of update, a rumor about this morning. Apple are due to launch augmented reality glasses this year, something that's kind of been in the works for 3 or 4 years. People have been talking about it a lot as the kind of next big thing. Facebook obviously already have their popular kind of Oculus virtual reality glasses, but these ones will be augmented reality, which is AR rather than VR. That means it's going to be a mix of seeing something that's virtual, but also seeing the real world at the same time. So the virtual aspect will kind of be overlaid on the real world. So it's slightly different from being totally immersed in a sort of virtual reality environment. The rumor is that they'll be called reality, but that's TBA. But they're supposed to be coming out in the spring, and obviously Apple have done a lot to sort of transform spaces when they launch a product, and the way that they kind of created the smartphone, even though there were phones which were sort of smart before Apple, the iPhone kind of changed everything. So people are expecting that maybe their virtual reality or augmented reality device will kind of change things and be much more popular than maybe than the Oculus is at the moment. A couple of other things, sort of broader things. I think you'll see a lot more focus on brand marketing in digital this year. I think there's a number of reasons for this. The kind of positive reason might be that digital is kind of very mature now, and lots of people would have kind of sort of maxed out what they can maybe do with sort of performance marketing with digital, and maybe looking for other areas for their business. So they're thinking about the sort of more traditional form of building awareness using digital. A cynical sort of take on it might be also that some of the tracking abilities of platforms like Facebook and others has been taken away by some of the changes to cookies and to the iPhone, for example, from Apple. And so where there's less sort of traceability, maybe there's a kind of a bit of an incentive for people to talk about, more sort of fluffy metrics like brand marketing. That is slightly cynical, but yes, I think people will be talking about brand marketing a lot more in digital this year, and there obviously is a role for that in building awareness long term for your brand, rather than just always thinking about kind of generating sales instantly, which it's very effective at doing often, and that's often how people think about digital advertising. Maybe just one last thing I'll talk about now. You will all have seen all the kind of various software that's emerged in it's certainly become popular in the last 2 to 3 months around AI. Probably initially kind of mid last year, people were playing around with AI art a lot. So you were putting in a sort of 3 or 4 word prompt into sort of Mid-Journey or DALL-E, and it was generating an amazing image kind of based on what you put in there, and that was kind of an incredible thing. And obviously there's lots of talk about how ethical that is, because it's building on work that's been scanned across the internet. There's a lot of debate about that, so that will continue, and obviously debate about whether that will replace kind of human artists in some respect, or make it sort of more accessible to create art when you have no kind of artistic ability. Similar for text. Just before Christmas, some of you would have probably played with Chat GPT, which is slightly different spin. So you put in some text into the software, and it can generate whole articles or conversations. It can even generate code to build web pages or other applications. So it's a kind of amazing thing, actually, when you first try it, the kind of quality that it does generate. Again, whether that will really have a massive impact on straight away is hard to tell. The kind of stuff it generates, I would say, is interesting. It might be something that you would use to perhaps build upon if you were writing something, just to give you ideas or to give you a structure. Whether it would replace a copywriter, not right now, I don't think. And copywriters would definitely say that, but it will produce a lot of sort of bland content, which if everyone starts using it, effectively the internet will get incredibly boring, and the same. So I would say don't rely on some of these tools for that reason, because obviously they do tend to produce a kind of bland, average type of content, but it can be very interesting to kind of do the heavy lifting perhaps of writing, or to get you some inspiration, or for you to have something to base something on, or just to do tasks which are fairly straightforward, and they're definitely fun to play with and to understand. They're all kind of free to use. So if you search, as I say, Mid-Journey, DALL-E, Chat GPT online, you can have a go. Sometimes they're a bit overwhelmed by the numbers of people using them, but generally they're free to use, and AI will become a part, obviously, more and more of everything everything digital in the next sort of 2 to 5 years. So that's it for trends, I think.
Amazing. Thanks, Barney. We had a couple of questions come through that I think are relevant just to ask now. I think they'll be quite simple. What's the current demographic for Be Real? Who's using that?
Yeah, and I
businesses
think that's
and
teenagers mainly. I would say that's more from my observation of my teenagers than any stats I have to my fingertips. But no, I think definitely, yeah, teenagers. I think it's the same audience that the likes of Instagram perhaps got a bit tired of that sort of, as I said, very curated, very
right.
highly edited kind of worldview, and the whole idea about Be Real is this kind of instantaneous. What you're doing right now, take a picture of it. Don't sort of do anything much. Just take a real picture of yourself. Anyone who's tried it well, anyone I think of my age or similar who's tried it will probably find it a bit onerous after a couple of weeks. The idea of having to take a picture all the time doesn't sound like much, but it's quite irritating. But I found it irritating, but other people, yeah, do enjoy doing that if they've got plenty of time on their hands.
Yeah, thank you. And another question that I think might be relevant for a number of people on this call. How effective would you say TikTok is for B2B compared to B2C? Have you seen any good examples of B2B businesses utilising this?
So I'd say no, I haven't seen any good examples. I would say it's interesting. It's not the obvious thing that I would, come to mind if I was thinking of B2B. It is definitely a youthful audience. I mean, not to say that B2B doesn't necessarily kind of target people who are younger, but you probably want to have a sort of youthful spin to your audience if you're going to go onto TikTok at all. Yeah, most of the stuff on there at the moment is definitely not B2B at all. I think it's interesting, and I think it will develop. I'd see it taking a similar kind of trajectory to YouTube potentially. So when YouTube was first launched or taken over by Google, certainly, and became more popular, at the time it was famous for dogs on skateboards, pranks, like silly stuff. And I was at Google at the time, and it was maybe a bit of a hard sell to a lot of advertisers, just at all, let alone whether they were B2B ones. Having said that, after a few years, as it became more mature and more different types of people were using it, obviously there's a real sort of wide range of content, and actually then content that's more relevant to B2B, more serious content comes onto the platform. I mean, TikTok already has things like Book Talk, which you could argue is a bit more serious, a little bit less frivolous than some of the content on there. So, and there's lots of how-to content as well. So there is, the TikTok itself is already changing towards some of those maybe slightly more serious and more advertiser-friendly type of content, and that will continue. So I think eventually, it seems maybe silly to say it now that B2B would be something that was a lot of advertisers were getting onto TikTok for, but I would say actually maybe in a year or two you'll see that, and I guess if you do things the right way, there's always opportunities, and then maybe there's an opportunity for someone to kind of be the B2B advertiser that does really harness it well, and you'll see that happen. There was stuff on YouTube, for example, like Siemens Engineering, who were making, I don't know, just giant machines and that kind of stuff, really serious stuff that only really appealed to a sort of small niche of people. They did really well with videos which just really spoke to their audience on YouTube, and I think you will start to see similar stuff on TikTok. Yes. Thanks,
Barney. Moving on now to the next question, so a slightly big one. Yeah. What is the metaverse?
I'll take a big swig of water for us this one. What is metaverse? Yeah, that is a good question. So I've got my notes here for this one particularly. So no, the metaverse, the term metaverse was first coined in 1992 in a science fiction novel called Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. So that's where the actual word comes from, and the concept of it, I guess most people haven't read that, but the concept of it you might be more familiar with from Ready Player One, which was a science fiction novel again, and then was turned into a film sort of fairly recently by Steven Spielberg. So the broad consensus of what the metaverse is and what that word means, and it's something in the future, it's not here now, despite what Mark Zuckerberg would like you to think. It's basically a artificial virtual universe that connects a series of small virtual worlds so that you can travel between them. So the idea that, say, a virtual world that you think of now might be like Fortnite or Roblox, or any of the kind of games which are very immersive. Well, the idea is that there'll be a way for you to take your identity from, say, Roblox into Minecraft, into Fortnite, into, I don't know, a kind of marketplace, into some other kind of service. So rather than the internet now is very much, we look at some devices, it's kind of 2D, and that's how we experience it. It's looking at and watching the internet or reading the internet. The idea of the next internet, or the metaverse, as you might call it, will be experiencing it in a fully immersive way. So you're, as yourself or as an avatar, potentially wearing virtual clothes, etc., are traveling around this metaverse. And the reason that people like Mark Zuckerberg are keen on it, because they see it as the next stage of computing. We're moving from the internet sort of mobile stage of computing to another stage. That's coming, and it's not here yet, because we just don't have, just a very low penetration of the devices. So in order to be in a virtual world right now, you have to use, Facebook's Oculus Quest or a different VR headset. It's all a little bit clunky. It's quite large, reasonably expensive, and it just doesn't have that wide appeal or that wide accessibility. So most people can't just go, and they don't have one in their house. Everyone has a phone, everyone has an iPad potentially, or a lot of people do. But yeah, you can't get into the virtual world. So that's what the metaverse is really. It's this future kind of operating system that's going to connect all these other virtual experiences that are run by different sort of companies or organizations, and you'll be able to kind of wander around in it, experiencing things sort of directly, rather than just looking at them or reading them in the way that we do now. What else do I need to say about metaverse? I would say you don't need to worry about it. So it's not here right now. You can't really be in the metaverse in any real sense. Just again, despite what Facebook might tell you, that they're putting a lot of money into it themselves. So they're hoping to kind of obviously be everywhere. They want to be if you think Google now is the kind of connecting system of the internet to a certain extent, obviously Facebook would like to be that for the next stage, and Google would like to be that as well, and Apple would like to be that as well, all to make money really. Yeah, so people, in terms of, if someone says they've got a metaverse strategy, I'd be very cynical as to what that really means. What we have seen is a few kind of big brands and big agencies who want to get onto the next big thing, maybe creating a kind of Second Life or a game type experience where you go to your virtual Chanel shop or something like that, and there's 3 people there, and they spend a lot of money on these things, and they're just very sparsely used or populated, because most people don't have these headsets, and they're not that interested. The things you do see now which are interesting are probably things like the artist, music artist Travis Scott, who did a live gig in Fortnite, for example. You'll see those kind of entertainment examples a lot. Those are happening kind of right now, and those are obviously brilliant ways for someone like him to connect to a big audience, potentially of people who would like his music anyway, because they're sort of younger people who are gaming in Fortnite. So that kind of works, and that's really popular. Virtual goods are obviously on the rise. So we've seen things like NFTs. We've seen things like the kind of clothing and goods that you might buy in a game like Fortnite. People will spend real money on those. And you've seen things like World of Warcraft. Obviously, people spend a lot of time gaming in those kind of massive role-playing games and other gaming experiences. So probably the metaverse at the moment, the most immersive things that we have are probably gaming. It's mainly gaming. Things that kind of Meta or other people who are talking about the metaverse want to see perhaps are more serious things, like us having this meeting, for example, in the metaverse, and talking to each other in a virtual world, but that's not really widely adopted or here yet. The likes of Apple getting involved obviously will help, and more devices and better and smaller, faster and easier to use devices will come on stream, and the metaverse will be realized at some point, but definitely not in 2023.
So in your opinion, it's not likely to be an advertising platform anytime soon for any smaller brand?
No, it doesn't exist at the moment, I would say. So the games exist, you can advertise in games.
Okay. Then moving on to our next question. We've covered a little bit of this already, so you might want to talk a bit more about Twitter perhaps. But so should people be joining TikTok, which we've discussed a little bit, or leaving Twitter, and who uses Facebook anymore?
Okay. Should you be joining TikTok? Yes. I mean, if your business is applicable, we've talked a little bit about whether it's for B2B, probably not so much, but yeah, definitely if you're selling the right kind of things, you're selling youth-orientated goods, clothing, that kind of stuff, entertainment, brands that are trying to get a more youthful audience. That audience is what TikTok's audience is right now. It is growing, so older people are starting to use it, even millennials. But older people, more older than millennials, are maybe starting to use it a little bit. It's really is growing. I think the figure I've got here at the moment is 9 million UK users, but that would have been much less even a year, even 2 years ago. It's really just emerged probably during lockdown, kind of exploded, particularly in usage. Twitter is an interesting one. So obviously Twitter's been in the news a lot. There's been lots of panic, there's some moral panic about Twitter. You know, can we use Twitter because Elon Musk? Do we like Elon Musk? Is he too right wing? Is he going to destroy it? Do we just have to go and somewhere else, or you know, go to Mastodon or these other things? I would not worry about it too much. Obviously, he's trying to, whatever you think about him, he's a businessman and he's trying to make it work in terms of financially. The problem with TikTok, sorry, the Twitter, is that, you know, I really like Twitter personally. It's fantastic in many ways, but it's never really made any money. It's only just barely profitable in the last 2 or 3 years. So in the contrast to, you know, the likes of Facebook, which is a kind of money-making machine, Twitter's always been quite small, but it has an oversized influence because of the people that use it. So journalists use it, politicians use it a lot, you know, businesses. So there's lots of kind of influential things happen on Twitter. You know, you've got the likes of Donald Trump using it and then get kicked off it and all this sort of thing. Lots of controversies and all this stuff happening. Lots of negative things happening as well. Lots of arguing and that kind of stuff and bad behaviour. But as a commercial entity, it's been quite ineffective. I think at the moment Twitter is broadly the same as it was before Elon Musk took over. You know, journalists like to panic about it because they love it so much and they're worried about it, like it's their small child. But effectively, I think it's the same as it was now. He hasn't really damaged it too much. And he has got rid of lots of members of staff, which is not a positive thing. And certainly for content moderation and that kind of stuff, that doesn't seem great. But on the other hand, he doesn't want to drive it into, it's not in his interest to drive it into the ground. He wants it to be more popular, if anything. And although he's talked about a lot of changes, the changes he's made are not that massive so far. So I wouldn't panic. I think it's here for the sort of, certainly for the medium term. It's not, you know, by dint of it not being particularly commercial, there's probably not many people here necessarily who've advertised on it. It's not anywhere near as big, but it is good for advertising for certain things. It's good to launch products. It's obviously very sort of contemporary and of the moment. So again, for events and that kind of thing, if you're launching a new product, it can be really good. And it does reach quite influential people, as I said. So there's lots of kind of positive stuff about it. I wouldn't worry too much about things like Mastodon, unless you're, a computer engineer or really geeky. You're going to find it, quite hard to use. It's nowhere near as good as Twitter or as big or as interesting. A lot of people have tried it. The figures show that lots of people tried it a couple of months ago, and those people are all now leaving or not using it. They've got a profile but don't use it. I think they've all kind of come back to Twitter really and realized it's all kind of continuing. There are a couple of other options. Excuse me. Like there's one called Post, which is quite good. Probably is a bit more user friendly. That's quite small and sort of beta at the moment. And there's another one called Blue. Well, there's one that's not launched yet. That's called Blue Sky, which is from Jack Dorsey, who founded Twitter. But that might be an interesting one if he can obviously recreate something perhaps a bit different from Twitter, but broadly appealing to the same kind of people. That might be interesting. You could sign up for the beta of that. As I say, that's not launched, so that could be interesting when that comes out. If he can do something that might sort of draw people away, but has the same kind of network effect. I mean, the fact is, you go to these other things, they're not generally as easy to use as Twitter, and obviously there's not that many people on them, so they don't have the network effect. You won't see all the people that you follow kind of right now. In terms about Facebook, yeah, as I said before, Facebook, I don't want to be negative about Facebook particularly, but Facebook feels like it's kind of, we've already reached peak Facebook a little bit sort of last year, and there is a gentle decline. There have obviously been regular kind of scandals and about privacy and lots of sort of headwinds for Facebook, and there has been the issue of Apple changing iOS, so that's kind of slightly, not disabled is the wrong word, maybe slightly taken away some of the really kind of accurate personalized advertising that the advertisers obviously loved. People maybe didn't love it quite so much, but brands liked it, and that's maybe taken away some of the, well, that's not necessarily taken away the effectiveness, but maybe taken away the measurement of some of that effectiveness for agencies or people like me to prove to advertisers that it's working. So that maybe has affected them financially a little bit. So I would see, maybe Facebook is very broad. So everyone's kind of on Facebook. The demographics broad and still huge. I mean, I think I've got here is 46 million UK users. So that's most people who are on the internet are kind of on Facebook to a greater or larger extent. Younger people perhaps have, slightly abandoned it to some of these other networks. They obviously new networks tend to spring up amongst younger people first of all, and then they will be on TikTok, and they will be on Instagram, and they will be on these other ones. Yeah, just for reaching other demographics, then it's still very effective. And it's not going away anytime soon. And obviously it owns Instagram as well, which again continues to be popular.
Barney, can I interrupt you on that to ask you a question about Instagram?
Yeah, so Instagram, yes, it's still a popular platform. About 30 million people in the UK on Instagram. Again, really good for certain things, slightly more youthful. Yeah, great for visual things, fashion, entertainment, retailing, that kind of stuff. Again, pivoting a little bit more towards video to kind of capture that TikTok audience. So you've got Reels and advertising, within Reels. So yeah, that continues to be popular and is right for certain types of people. LinkedIn, the one that we all love, when we're businesses or in a B2B and talk about stuff. Yeah, that's really popular, and that's kind of, I think, gained quite a lot during the pandemic. People perhaps had more time on their hands if they were home. They could perhaps spend more time on LinkedIn. So that's about 30 million users. So again, but great if you're a B2B brand, particularly. LinkedIn and Twitter are probably the two for B2B brands. And that's, I'll probably leave it there. Pinterest is great as well, quite small, but great, very female orientated and great for retailers, entertainment and certain things. Yeah, it's a really nice, there's a bit more of a friendly network. You don't tend to get so much negativity on something like Pinterest as you sometimes get with the others. So the Pinterest is definitely worth a mention for certain advertisers and certain brands.
Brilliant, thank you, Barney. I'm just looking at some of the questions that are coming through now, and I know we have got a few others to get through. I feel like you're going to have lots of follow-up chats with people or lots of follow-up things in the email. Quick question on Instagram and algorithms. Somebody's made a comment about how challenging that's been in terms of maintaining engagement. Have you got an opinion on the way that's going? Is it really trending towards video, or yeah,
I mean, I think yeah, the thing with I mentioned, short form video as a trend. Yeah, definitely if you're on Instagram, it's not going to be enough for you as a brand just to do static images. You're going to want to really dip your toes in Reels and create that kind of content. It is more challenging, I know, to create video content. But yeah, I think to get that to tweak the algorithm and to get yourself out there, then yeah, you're going to want to have that. As these products come out, naturally the owners, Facebook, when they produce something on Instagram or on Facebook itself that's video related, they're kind of trying to push people towards using it. So they want to give it an extra lift, in the algorithm. It's going to appear very prominently, and it's going to take a lot of that real estate up, I guess. So yeah. Now the future is definitely moving much more towards video, and has been, for some time, just generally. But this kind of more mobile first short form video is taking over social media really. So yeah, you'd be wise to kind of invest in it as a brand and not just rely on text and images all the time, though they have their place as well.
Thanks, Barney. Right, I'm aware that there's been a few other questions come through. I'm going to try and make sure we can cover them in some of the other questions we have, because we are short of time. So we should get moving. So the next question is, again, it could be quite a broad one, but as in your expert opinion, what are you seeing as the common mistakes that people should really avoid, when it comes to their digital marketing? What things are people not quite doing?
I mean, I think there's lots of pitfalls. Obviously always employ an expert, I would say, self-servingly. But no, yeah, there are lots of pitfalls, and it can seem, difficult sometimes to get on top of some of these different things, and they change a lot. Some of the main things I kind of picked out. One definite one, which people should really bear in mind, is that don't look to kind of start advertising or maybe investing a lot of time in social media or all these things if your actual website is quite poor. It can be quite difficult for me sometimes, approached by people. They say, oh, I'm really keen to do Google ads, or I'm really keen to do this and that, put some money into it, we want to get started. And then I kind of look at their website and think, we've really got to kind of sort this out first. And it's not generally in my interest to say that, because I'm not a web designer, so it won't benefit me to say that. But the fact is, just like in the real world, if you've got a kind of tiny little shop that's kind of falling down, there's a bit ragged, you know, Windows dirty, it's a bit all cracked. You know, you're not going to want to open a big sort of launch event and say, let's get everyone in here and try and promote my business. And the same with digital. You know, if your website is a bit kind of old, you haven't changed it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, certainly for 5 years. There are trends in web design and things do change quickly, and your business changes as well. So you should be keeping your website kind of up to date with what's the latest thing is in your business. But certain things to really look out for would be slow speed. So if you've got a slow website that's slow, either desktop or mobile or both, you can do a test on this. You can look up Google's site speed test and it'll tell you, or other tests. Google certainly will penalize you for slow speed if you're using Google Ads, and it will penalize the reach of your SEO kind of efforts with organic results if you've got a slow loading website. One of those tests actually tells you a lot of other things and tells you what the problems are. It could be kind of large images or sort of unoptimized elements of your website. But yeah, slowness is definitely bad. And it's just bad for user experience as well. So people very time poor, and you know, especially on the mobiles, they don't want to wait around. And if they do have a sort of slow loading website, they'll just go to another one, and you'll kind of lose that business. You know, and on top of that, I guess a poor experience. So if there's just bad design or there's a very little amount of content, you know, again, if you want to sort of rank from an SEO perspective, you want your pages to appear highly on Google, you know, that's going to be mainly content driven. So if you're not really talking about your services and your products enough in detail, you don't have high quality content about them, that's not going to help you. You've got to, you know, match the sort of professionalism and the look of your website to the professionalism and kind of size of your business. So, you know, if you are a prestigious or a large business, then obviously you want that website to reflect that, and you don't want something that is kind of from five or 6 years ago that you don't change very often and it is a bit out of date. The other thing is, I guess, just websites that are hard to use. So if it's hard to buy from you, you know, go through the user experience yourself, buy some, try and do a test purchase, especially if you're quite distant as a manager, perhaps from the actual day-to-day operations. Is it easy to buy? Are there too many steps? Is it confusing? Is it hard to get in contact with you? Perhaps if you're more lead driven, do you have to fill out, you know, copious forms, or it doesn't work somehow? Anything like that. Obviously, you're putting barriers in between the goal, which is normally to sell something, or to get someone to contact you. So yes, always invest in your web experience before you start driving people there. So before you start paying for advertising to send people there, or paying for attention anyway through social media or through other means, you know, email marketing, whatever it is. You know, get that website right first, and then kind of obviously move on to market it. And also don't do the opposite. So don't spend 50 grand on an amazing all singing or dancing website and then forget to tell anyone about it afterwards because you spent all your budget. So that's definitely a self-serving argument, but it's also true. So yeah, have a marketing plan, have a marketing budget for the launch of that amazing website, because you want to tell people about it. And same with making videos and stuff. Don't just push your videos out there on YouTube or wherever else it is. Maybe think about giving them a bit of a push with advertising. The other one I'll probably just finish on for time reasons, and this is one that is quite amusing in some ways to me, but I get, and you wouldn't think you would get this, but I do get this, and sometimes from quite big companies, I get a lot of, oh yeah, so our Google ads or our marketing, digital marketing is done by my brother's mate's cousin who we met down the pub because he's good at computers. Generally, that person is not as good at computers as you think they are, and they're not the person to be running your social media or doing your advertising. So don't just hand stuff to people who, because you don't like digital or you're worried about it, that you think are better at it. You know, your kids, for example. I've definitely heard of people's kids running their stuff. Again, that's probably not the best thing to be doing. Even if it's your only option, don't do that. So yeah, just don't hand off these tasks because you don't like them to people who you think might be good at them through quite spurious means, because it happens probably more often than people think. And maybe just a final one, I think with social media, I get a lot of questions about how often should you post and that sort of thing. Probably the main thing that you should think about is not getting loads of enthusiasm for social media and then it just kind of falling off. So you do, you know, 100 posts January, you do 10 posts a week in January, but then you don't do anything for the rest you know, of winter or spring. Just try and have consistency and maybe do some planning with social media. That will really help you, and that will help to establish you and to help to manage people's kind of expectations of what they'll get from you. So just try and sort of do regular stuff rather than worrying about how many times you post. It's much better to post sort of more consistently and be realistic about what time you have to do it, and to, you know, to choose choose your platforms carefully.
Brilliant. I'm just going to take this time just to have a look at some questions that we had sent in, and then I'm going to pick, I think we're only going to have time for one or two, and then I'll have to wrap up. But as I said before, we're going to be sharing Barney's contact details afterwards, and resources around. So if there are things that we didn't get to, we will definitely try and get you some answers. And some of these things, hopefully it's prompted you to think a little bit differently about your digital marketing for this year, and probably warrants another conversation and further thinking with Barney and going forward. So yeah, let me just have a quick look. We've covered some of these things. Well, one thing I'd like to ask you, Barney, is, so if there are people starting out here today, so startup businesses with a strategy, you know, a strategy is a big word. What would you say is the first thing or the one thing that people should do if they're kind of starting that journey?
Yeah, I think the strategy, definitely is a big word, and obviously a full marketing strategy for a big business, could be very, very complicated and have lots of different elements, and there are different elements to it. But I think the main thing I would think about for smaller businesses, and just for time reasons, is to focus on the audience. So it seems like a kind of obvious thing to say, but if you work out, who you're targeting, who your sort of target customers are, maybe take it to another level. You might have different sort of personas for different products or services. But if you have a really kind of focus on who the customer is, everything kind of comes from that. So if you're choosing your social media platform and you know who your customer is, you'll say, well, they're not appropriate for TikTok because I don't think they're going to be on TikTok. So if you have that in that kind of overarching thing in your mind when you're making decisions about marketing in general, certainly about digital marketing, then you can start to kind of assess all the stuff that you're doing, even down to say, I'm posting this thing today. Is that relevant to the customer that we've identified that we want to reach? Oh, well, it's not really. So let's not do that, or let's do a slightly different thing. So yeah, it's something you can use to kind of judge all your activities. And then just be customer centric. So, again, don't get caught up in all the kind of stuff that can happen in the business. If you're being customer centric all the time, then hopefully that will really drive your success. And it certainly will do with digital, because it's often quite reasonably clear how you can target different groups of people on digital. So by having clear ideas about who those people might be, then obviously that will lead you to make good decisions and hopefully drive you towards sort of more successful campaigns. But yeah, that's probably the simplest thing that you can do. Obviously, there's lots of other things to think about positioning and messaging and all this sort of stuff. But really having that clarity about whom you're trying to reach, that could affect everything from your advertising to your social media to what you write in a blog, or what the copy is on your website, for example. If you always have that clear idea of who you're writing for, then it's going to resonate and engage people a lot more, and you'll see that success. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Barney. So I'm going to wrap up now, because I could listen to you talk for hours, and I know some of us as well could do that. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to host and to facilitate this session. And big thank you to Barney Durrant for your expertise today. It's been great. And again, a massive thank you to Ali Davey from Sussex Innovation, our sponsor. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure. Have a great rest of the day and see you soon.